Okay folks, welcome back. Today we got a video on Smith & Wesson J-frames, specifically Chief Specials. We've got a few models out here and we're going to be going through kind of a timeline of what went on between 1950 and the mid 70s for these models, and then up until kind of the present day of what the Chief Special looks like today, and a few of these models, kind of how that has played out through the years. So to start off, we're going to be looking at this guy right here. Get you a good shot of him. So this is an interesting little gun. It's a special model, and I will tell you why. So you may notice this one looks a little different than the others, in that it's got a shorter or a smaller trigger guard and a bit shorter of a grip frame here. You can tell by where this diamond meets up with the end of this line on the grip. So this is a smaller frame. It's not exactly a J frame as we know it. This is more of an improved I frame. And the way this came about, in 1950, late 49, early 50, so Smith & Wesson is getting everything back on production. Stuff's getting pushed out the doors again after everything kind of got tabled and paused for the war effort, when pretty much every manufacturing company was geared up towards war support. Smith & Wesson was no different. They had kind of stopped everything. But in 49, 50, there was a want for a smaller 38 special revolver. So at the time, Smith & Wesson had the I-frame, which looked pretty similar to this, except for a smaller cylinder window and then smaller cylinder, of course. But it had this smaller trigger guard and smaller frame, just like this revolver here. And it just wasn't bulky enough. It didn't have enough steel behind it to support a 38 special cartridge, which was what Smith & Wesson and then everyone else kind of wanted, was a 38 special smaller revolver. The Detective Special, Colt's Detective Special, was not that much smaller than Smith & Wesson's K-frame. So their K-frame, which at the time would have been the M&P, military and police revolver, in the 2-inch configuration, just wasn't small enough. And then the Detective Special was not that much smaller than the K-frame. So there was a need and a want for a revolver like this. And what makes this special is not only is it a pre-36, in the 50s, before the revolvers even had model numbers, but this one is quite different because of those smaller parts, the trigger guard and grip frame. And it's got a few other interesting features too. So this has got a number 2, second generation, whatever you like to call it, flat latch cylinder release, and you can see it doesn't stick out that far. It is a little farther than the first flat latch, which would have been a little more oval shaped and really flat right on the frame. That second style of release just made it a little easier to grab onto with your thumb. So when this specific frame size of Chief came out, it would have had a half moon front sight. It also would have had a service style grip, not these Magnas. And it would have had that very first cylinder release, which was actually a classic style. I think they called those hourglass. There's a few different names for those, but it wouldn't even have been a flat latch. After that one, which would have been like serial number 1 through a few hundred, I mean, it was just the very first Chiefs out, they would have switched to more of this style. It would have had the first generation, first model flat latch. It still would have had the half moon front side. And then on up into serial numbers I believe maybe 15, 16,000, you start seeing a few more of these styles. So you get your second style flat latch. They switch to a ramp style, kind of more of a combat front sight there, just to get a more modern look over those half moons that had been out for pretty much 50 years at the time. Colt and Smith & Wesson were using those, so they just kind of want something that looks a little newer, maybe a little more aggressive. So they switched to that ramp style, and then they switched to a Magna style grip. This horn shape up at the top. These are very common. So that's kind of what we're working with here in these early Chief Specials. You also notice it does have a screw up at the top of the frame, and it's got one under the trigger guard. So this is a 5-screw frame, and these guys are getting really rare. If you can find these in good condition nowadays, grab them up and buy them and put them in the safe, because these are not out there anymore, especially if you can find the old red boxes that these would have shipped in the really early days. You don't see these a whole lot. This one is serial number 34,000 and some. So put that in context of who knows how many Chief Specials have been made by now, but the 34,000 Chief Special, that's a pretty cool thing to have, and I was eager to get it. I got that online at an auction, got a really good deal on it, and a lot of people just don't know what these are, so they don't even notice the trigger guard and the shorter frame, just because it's a really small part of history there, those 2 or 3 years of when they started coming out. But if you can find these anymore, definitely grab them up and put them in the safe and keep them, because you just don't see these anymore. So yeah, this one dates to, I believe, 1953. So it's kind of what we're looking at with the very, very early Chief Specials. I love that 5-screw frame. I think that's really pretty. This color case up here on the hammer, you just don't see manufacturing or firearms like this anymore. But yeah, this is where it started in 1950. There's a pretty cool story there as well. I believe at the 1950 International Meeting of Chiefs of Police, or Police Chiefs, Smith & Wesson kind of unveiled their idea of a new small 38 special revolver, and that's where it got its name. The whole line of Chief Specials was from this meeting of police chiefs. They kind of voted on a name and they came up with the Chief Special, which was a pretty cool little story of how this guy came to be. So yeah, a few of these features are slightly different than what we would have saw in the very, very beginning, but this is kind of the starting point of the Chief Special timeline and the life of these revolvers. So also we have a model here. This is a 37 Chief Special Airweight, and this guy came about in, I believe, 52, 53, about that same era. It was not a Model 37 at the time. The model numbers didn't come until 1957. But yeah, this guy was released with an alloy frame, and in the very beginning I believe they had an alloy cylinder as well. Shortly thereafter they started putting steel cylinders in them, just because of maybe some problems with structural, they just weren't as strong as they needed to be, so they changed them over to steel. And if you can find them with that alloy cylinder, those pre-models, those are a really rare bird to find too, so a few things to look for. But this one does have the diamond on the grip, and then it has that flat latch as well. So this is a third style. If you remember how the second looked, it didn't stick out quite that far. This one sticks out pretty good. So there's a difference there in your flat latches. A lot of people like those. Just as a sign of these older guns. It is a cool style. It looks good. I love that flat latch with the diamond grip look. This is a really nice little revolver as well. So around 67, 68, I believe these diamond grips and flat latches started phasing out into kind of what we see in these 70s J-frames. So they would have had the plain style grip, then more the modern looking cylinder release that we all know. So yeah, 52 or 3, 1952 or 1953, these Chief Special alloy frame, Chief Special airweights came out, and they were in production up until probably mid 70s, late 70s, I'm not sure. This one is a 63 or 64 model, I believe. So it's a little older as well. And yeah, you'll know those by that model 37. You can tell, if you hit it in the light, you can tell the difference in that steel barrel and that alloy frame. This alloy frame is almost a black color. It's very dark. And then that barrel is the old Smith & Wesson blue color cylinder as well. Those really pretty hardening colors on the hammer and trigger. So we got that. Then we move on to this guy, which is a model 60. So this is a stainless Chief Special. Obviously stainless frame, cylinder, hammer and trigger. And these are really nice pieces too. A lot of people love to carry these because of that stainless. They're just so resistant to wear. Really tough old revolvers. These have been many backups. I'm sure ankle holsters and shoulder rigs of police officers from the 60s on up until probably still today. I'd say some stubborn old guys still carry these. So the Model 60, I believe, came out in 1965, and I believe it still wears the crown of the first stainless revolver. Yeah, 1965 these would have came out, and they have an R in their serial number. A little different. They don't have that J like the Chief Specials and the other models do. These have an R, which makes them a little different. And all these are pretty much a stainless Model 36. I don't think there's any other difference. Stainless hardware, stainless frame. These are really nice little revolvers. Hard to come by. Still in great shape, that is. So a pretty cool piece of documentation that came with our Model 60 there. I got this a few months ago. And when I found this in the box, I was really surprised that this is still here today. So it's got the original receipt from Trout River Fish Company in Jacksonville, Florida. It has the original owner's name, purchased December of 1974. This revolver cost a whopping $120.64, including taxes. So that's a really cool little piece of documentation. So that's our Model 60. Then we get on into the 70s with this Model 36-1. This was made, I believe, 1973, 1974. And this is a little bit of a special model. See if we can get a view of that. It is a -1 36. And for whatever reason, Smith & Wesson designated the -1 as a 3-inch heavy barrel model. So all of the -1s you will see have a 3-inch heavy barrel. It's easy to tell that big barrel. They've got a shorter ramp front sight. Excuse me. It's also a little thicker. Yeah, there's your 36-1. Not much different than what a no-dash 36 would have looked like. It would have had the shorter 2-inch barrel with the longer ramp front sight. You could also pick those up in a 3-inch as well, a smaller barrel 3-inch length. But yeah, also it has a target trigger, which is a little wider. Those may be a 1/2 inch, I forget. You don't see that a whole lot on non-target revolvers, so that was kind of a cool little thing. So yeah. Another variant of Chief Special here. So those are the models we have here to look at. Interesting history. Fun little guns to shoot, and they all started with this guy here. We'll get another shot of him. Really interesting little revolver. Still has beautiful case hardening. Really bright blue right there on the hammer. Smooth back strap. So there's a bit of a history from the 50s up through the 70s. I think today the Model 36 may be up to a -10 now, 36-10, and those will have the internal lock on the cylinder frame about right here, and they will look different. I think there's a classic series or a classic line of revolvers Smith & Wesson has now where you can still buy some of these old guns. I know they have a Model 19, I think a 27, and that 36 is in there as well. So I've never shot a newer one, so I can't compare the old ones versus the new ones, but I know the old ones perform very well, tried and true. And these are favorites of a lot of people. like I mentioned earlier, for backup #2 revolvers for policemen in the day when revolvers were still being used prevalently. Target shooting, there was a Model 50, which was a 36, a Chief Special target. Those are very, very rare, but they would have had the adjustable rear sight on those there. So there are some target variants out there. I know they made a Model 60 target as well. Had a really, really tall front sight, and then the old adjustable rear sight. So there are a lot of variants of these out there, not just in the Chief Specials, but in the J-frame world as well. There's a lot of models. It became really popular for concealed carry with people, and then law enforcement used them quite a bit. So there's a cool timeline of the J-frames and how the Chief Special kind of came about. I think we're going to get a few of these out and shoot them. So stay tuned for that. Enjoy. Thank you. Okay, so we got the 36-1 3-inch barrel out. We're going to take a few shots with it. Did really well. Target trigger makes it a really easy pull, really easy shooter. Does well. Now we got the Model 60 out. We're going to take a few shots with it. We'll see how it does. Does nice. You can definitely tell a difference between the 3-inch heavy barrel and the 2-inch barrel. There's a little more pop with this one, but it still shoots and handles nice. Did good. Alright, we took some single action shots. We got the 3-inch back. We're going to take some double action shots with it. We're going to see how this big target trigger does in double action. Does really well. The trigger is really nice. Not a lot of recoil with these 38 Winchesters. Really well. I'm pleased. Alright, the -1 did very well double action. We got the Model 60 back. We're going to see how it does. We're going to try again. All right.
Reloads.
Little ammo malfunction there. did very well too, but there is a big difference in that 3-inch heavy barrel and the smaller 2-inch barrels. It's got a little pop, but very manageable, and it does really well. Smooth action, crisp trigger pull. Does well.